morning, everyone. Welcome to another webisode of All Politics Are Local. I'm WSAV.com now reporter John Dowding. Every week, we take the time to break down some of the big headlines coming out of Washington, D.C., and seeing how it affects us right here in the coastal empire and low country. As always, we're joined by one of our reporters from Capitol Hill. We're joined by Kellie Meyer, who is our Washington, D.C. correspondent, and she's joining us right now. Hey, Kellie, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, John. How are you?
We're all hanging in there. We're doing the best we can right now. Thank God the weather's gorgeous here in the coastal empire, so we're doing that. That's really getting us through. Uh,
Oh, send some sun up here. It's cloudy and miserable in DC today, so send some sun.
Nobody in Congress is quiet too, and it's still cloudy and depressing.
Yep. A constant cloud over Capitol Hill, right?
There's just a constant cloud over Capitol Hill. All right, well, let's shift gears and talk a little more positively, hopefully, about stuff. I mean, so the stuff going on right here in coastal empire in Georgia, South Carolina, even Florida and some other states across the country, they've started reopening. They've started their process of trying to reopen some different businesses that obviously have been closed because of this pandemic. On Friday here in Georgia, barbershops, nail salons, a bunch of places off the top of my head. I don't know every single one of them. It includes bowling alleys. A bunch of random businesses were given the okay by Governor Kemp to open, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they all did. So let's just start off with this, Kellie. What has been the response from some of our local lawmakers? Because this was a big headline last week. At first, the president supported Governor Kemp's decision to do this, and then literally less than a day later, he flip-flopped on what he said, and he said, it may have been a little too precocious, a little too early to open some things open. It's a
And
reopen.
that was which one did you mention there?
What the president had said about how he said he flip-flopped his decisions about the reopening.
Right.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
what has been the reaction from some of our local lawmakers?
There was a lot happening last week, and Georgia was really the focus for much of the country. And I know you guys are all there, and a lot of the viewers, obviously, in the state feeling this firsthand. But for myself in DC and other people around the country, they were looking at Georgia last week to see how they were going to handle this rollout. Should they do what the state's doing? Other elected officials looking at, should they follow their lead? Should they not? As you mentioned with the president, it seemed like, at least from what we were hearing up in Washington, was that he had maybe given the okay to Governor Kemp to go ahead and go forward with opening businesses like barbershops and tattoo parlors. And then, as you heard last Wednesday night, saying that he had a phone call with Governor Kemp and said he wasn't happy. He disagreed strongly, he said. And then again, the next night in the press briefing said he was mad at Governor Kemp. And Governor Kemp was put in this position where he was less than 48 hours from opening these non-essential businesses that were gaining some criticism among some mayors like you talked to in Savannah and elsewhere, Tybee Island. You saw it all in national networks as well. Does he go forward with opening, or does he listen to the president and maybe reel back? But as we saw, he went forward and put out his message on Twitter of why he was doing it. He said he had the data and the approval from healthcare public health officials to go ahead with this opening. And it was interesting to hear from lawmakers up here that I was talking with last week, Georgia Congress members, as well as the senators, Kellie Loeffler and David Perdue. And now I talked with David Perdue before Trump's press briefing, and he wasn't really saying one way or the other on Kemp. He was definitely standing behind President. He was definitely also, standing behind Kemp, but didn't give a specific. And it was a bit of back and forth, just trying to figure out where he stood with that. And in the end, he didn't comment on the specifics. As I returned to the story on Friday, he didn't comment on the specifics of Governor Kemp's plan. He says he's for a gradual, phased approach. Now with Loeffler, she said she wasn't going to be playing politics with it, not choosing Trump or Kemp on this, saying that she was on both their sides. But where we're coming from is it's not about politics, it's about a position. It's about, do you agree that these should open or do they not? And that was the question we were trying to propose to lawmakers, and whether they skirted around it or whether they answered, I'll leave that up to the viewers to decide. But we also did talk with Congressman Buddy Carter, who will air a soundbite there from him, basically saying that it's up to the people. If they want to go out, they have the option. If they don't want to, they don't have to. And that was kind of a resounding message I heard from a lot of the Georgia lawmakers last week.
It's all going to be dependent on how we react to it. Just because the gym's open doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go. Just because the hair salon's open doesn't mean you have to go. But if you do go, you need to be careful. You need to make sure you're washing your hands, make sure you're practicing social distancing as best you can. All of that is inherent upon us as citizens, and not just having the government tell us to do it, but us following through on it.
And we just heard that sound from Buddy Carter right now. So, it's definitely, like you said, it definitely put Georgia in the spotlight. Our mayor, Van Johnson of Savannah, as well as, the mayor of Tybee Island, Shirley Sessions, who you mentioned before, they were on all of the shows last week. They were on CNN, they were on MSNBC, really putting our area in a national spotlight during a national crisis, really picking a lot of people's brains about, whether or not they feel this is the right time to come back and reopen. And another thing we're going to be looking at today on Monday right now is some restaurants are also allowed to open again today. I actually just saw on my phone before while we were talking, I saw a notification from this one restaurant here in Savannah that put out a whole statement saying, even though we are allowed to open, the governor gave us the okay to reopen our dine-in facilities, because up until now, all they've been doing is takeout, obviously, and delivery. They said they're still not going to do it. They still don't feel safe. They don't feel comfortable. And they want to do it when they feel that they're not putting their workers' lives at risk, and also the lives of, some of the customers coming in and out. And I think you brought up a good point, Kellie, is we just wanted to know and get a feel for representatives of where they felt on the issue. And so, what can we see of how this situation here in Georgia, what have you heard from some other lawmakers, or even seen, because you cover a bunch of different states in the Southeast? What have some of these other states started to do? Have they started out this rollout like Governor Kemp is doing, or are they really just kind of discussing the right ways to do this still? Is it still plain in the books? What's the feel about
Yeah.
those other states?
Well, let's take a look at the neighbors. I mean, I know we were talking a bit about South Carolina last week. We're also seeing a gradual rollout, a bit slower than what you're seeing in Georgia. Then you saw Senator Lindsey Graham coming out saying that he was supportive of his governor, but not necessarily what Governor Kemp was doing. And that was the day before you saw President Trump make his statement, which really echoed what Graham had said on last Tuesday, was that this was too fast, too soon. So they're easing into it, as well as what the White House is saying. They want it to be in their phases, the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 that we talked about last week. They want to make sure that there's this 14 consecutive days of a decrease. They want to make sure that there's enough testing, enough PPE to get through this, to move on into those gradual phases. Then if we take a look at Alabama, we also talked with Democratic Senator Doug Jones, who was saying last week that he thought that the opening of South Carolina and Georgia was a little premature. And at that same time, we saw the governor, Kay Ivey of Alabama, saying that she also was going to, she felt it was too fast. She doesn't want to move forward until she sees sufficient testing. So that's a Republican governor in Alabama saying that she wants to see more testing before going forward, which is something that may clash with some in the White House saying that there is enough testing, things like that. And her and Doug Jones were in agreement, and saying that let's just slow down and take it easy. So to give a picture and a glimpse of what's happening with the neighbors, what's happening in the Southeast, you're seeing differing approaches. But as some lawmakers were pointing out, they were just worried about how it differs between one state doing one thing and one state doing another, but just having the border right there, how it may affect each other. So it's all different approaches, all different speeds. And we'll really see, I guess, in the next week or 2 weeks, the results maybe of how this is rolling out. And it'll be really interesting to see, as I know people are eager to get back. We all are. We all want to get back to work. We've all been cooped up, but how to do this safely, none of us have ever been through something like that. So different lawmakers and public officials are taking it from a different approach.
And it's so funny because while you were mentioning all these things, I'm having like flashbacks last week of some of the different headlines, because it seems like there's so much stuff that happens every week that it's hard to keep track of what day it is, what week it is, what has actually happened. I was actually going to mention too, Alabama and the governor, and she, like you just said, she came out and said it's too early. I also think, before we shift gears here, I think one key point is stuff that is something that Senator Lindsey Graham tweeted out. He said, he feels that our neighbors in Georgia, obviously he being from South Carolina, have been maybe doing this a little too early. And because he said, like that point you just made, the actions that are taking place in Georgia will affect other states in the region. It's the same kind of approach that Governor Cuomo in New York is doing. That's why he has that commission of so many governors and all the states around him, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, all these areas, because you have people who may live in New York but work in Connecticut, or work in Connecticut and live in New York, vice versa, and all that kind of stuff. So there's people traveling amongst these states, which is why this whole gradual approach to reopening has become such an important discussion, because it's really just questioning, are we there yet? Are we there yet for people's health and safety? And a bunch of other areas that we need to address before the country can go back to a new normal. But let's shift gears here. Another huge headline from last week that came out was the new allocation for loans for small businesses for the payroll protection program. Such a alliteration on a Monday morning. But we have more money in that account for small businesses, which did run out previously. So there were a lot of small businesses who were trying to apply for some of these loans and weren't successful, didn't have the chance to get that. So let's talk us through that new bill, Kellie. How is that new bill impacting some of these small businesses, and what is the benefits of it?
Yeah, so this is what people were waiting for because their applications weren't able to go through, and we saw that it ran out 2 weeks ago, I think coming up on 2 weeks. It's hard to keep track of the time. But we saw this go through. The House voted on it Thursday to replenish that account. So that was going through to give people more help in that, to give these small businesses a chance to get their applications through, get the funding. We were also seeing some headlines, as you saw with Shake Shack and with Chris, that some of these bigger companies and businesses were getting the loan before smaller businesses that needed it. So this is a chance for people to get that help they need. I'm going to be looking into that story a little bit today, just a little bit of a teaser going forward. I'm looking at also help for individual workers, which is something that Alabama Senator Doug Jones again is proposing in one of his new proposals and bill he's putting forward to focus on the workers that might not be included in the small business. So we'll be talking with him, and as well as the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. But I believe today is also at 10 a.m. Eastern, the time that people can go back in and start applying and getting their loans processed. I believe that's what's happening today. So people will see that replenished. A big question we had in a story I did just last Monday at this time was, are they going to need to do this again? We just went through this back and forth. They also included some healthcare funding in there. They were looking for funding for state and local governments, which didn't get through, so we're looking at another phase. But will they have to replenish this account? There's so much need. And this program is meant to be available until June 30th, 2020. So likely they might have to go back in and replenish this again. A lot of people are hoping they may not have to. The White House even said that they will visit that if they have to again, but they just want to make sure that people get this for the need they're feeling right now.
It's funny because I was going to ask you, whether or not we think that this is going to be another short-term solution and that they're going to have to push more funding into this. And because, we saw that account just dip like that. We saw such a dire need for all of this, and so many businesses. I know businesses here in Savannah, some of my colleagues here at WSAV were doing stories on that as well. And a lot of these businesses here were having the same issues. They couldn't get the loans that ran out too fast. They couldn't hear back from people, and it was definitely really hard. I also heard of this story in rural Virginia where there was a woman who owns her own business and she's her own employer and her own employee. And she just apparently, for some of the loan qualifications, you have to have at least 3 people working for you. And she's like, I'm an entrepreneur. I don't have any other employees and I need this aid, but I can't get it. So there's definitely a huge, huge, huge need for all of this. And I think we're going to just really have to see like you said, this is an unprecedented time. We're going to have to see what lawmakers are going to try to do to try to address this. Are they going to keep in every new bill for, every follow-up to the CARES Act? Are they going to try and be able to um, add some more funding for this area? Or are they going to start addressing some of those other areas like you talked about, state and local governments who also need money right now? Before we go, Kellie, I wanted to just ask you, what are some things you mentioned? You gave you gave a little tease to your story for today. But what are some other things we should keep an eye out for this week, coming out in Washington? What should be some things that we, while we're
Yeah.
forgetting it is, that we should be aware of? Okay, we're going to hear something from Washington this week that's going to impact us here.
Well, like you said, we got past this PPP funding, so that got replenished. I think what they're going to be looking at is maybe a phase 4. You'll see some discussions with that, what Democrats are wanting to see. We also, I believe I heard from Senate Leader, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, was that he didn't want to look into that phase 4 until they got back to Congress. So already next week is May. Lawmakers had put this May 4th date out there that they wouldn't be returning until then. It depends though, because I know there's still a shelter in place and social distancing in effect at least through May 15th here in DC. So how this all plays out, I think paying attention to when your lawmakers will be coming back. I was hearing a lot of calls last week in my interviews from these lawmakers saying that they think that they should be here. They're essential workers. They need to be in Congress working for the people. So they seem a little restless to get back here and start working on that phase 4. So I would keep an eye out for that. I think what we're going to be looking at next is where is there more need? I know we've been talking about this phase 4 for a few weeks now, and I think we had to get through that PPP funding first and that replenish deal. And now after that was through, they're going to be looking at, okay, where else can we look into? But yeah, there's going to be a lot happening this week as we're looking at the reopenings as well throughout the country, and people just feeling like, okay, it's almost May, so where do we go? Are we going to be getting back? There's a lot of questions that people are looking to the elected officials to answer. So we'll be trying to hold their feet to the fire and find them out for you.
All right. Thank you so much, Kellie, as always, for sitting down and talking with us every week, helping us catch up on stuff from last week and giving us a look ahead at next week. Thank you so much for being our connection to our lawmakers in Washington.
Absolutely. And please feel free, tweet me, email me, any questions you have at home. Please let me know. I'm happy to ask them for you and just keep you as informed as possible and connected as possible with your lawmakers on what's happening. We have a lot of questions for them, so we'll keep you posted of that.
Okay. Thanks, Kellie.
Thank you.
And as always, you can catch up on more of our episodes of All Politics Are Local right here on our website from WSAV. Just go to wsav.com/allpoliticsarelocal. And again, we'll be back next week with another webisode to help you guys catch up and get a feel for what's going on in Washington. Just know whenever our episodes are coming out, it's a Monday, so that way you can keep track of your week. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I'm John Dowding. Thank you so much. We'll see you again next week on All Politics Are Local.